This is the sound of your ride home with Dad after he caught you vaping. Awkward, isn't it? Most vapes contain seriously addictive levels of nicotine and disappointment. Know the real cost of vapes. Brought to you by the FDA.
70,000 people are here, and Bob Dylan is the reason for it.
Inspired by the true story.
For anyone who's gonna hold your attention on a stage, you have to kind of be a freak.
Are you a freak?
Hope so.
And starring Timothée Chalamet as Bob Dylan. He defied everyone.
Turn it down!
Play loud!
To change everything.
Make some noise, BD.
Timothée Chalamet, Edward Norton, Elle Fanning, Monica Barbaro. A complete unknown. Only in theaters Christmas Day. Rated R. Under 17, not admitted without parent.
In the time it takes us to say we're making a damn delicious caramel iced coffee with Folgers Instant Coffee, you know we're all about that drizzle. You could be savoring every sip. Damn right. It's Folgers Instant.
Welcome to the Ground Jewels. My name is James Dixon and I'm delighted you've joined us again this week. And we are talking Belfast and Belfast Windsor Park Stadium with the brilliant singer Carly Powley. It's a really exciting episode. And I timed this episode to coincide with my trip to Northern Ireland. I went last weekend, stormed Dara. Not necessarily the best weekend to go to Northern Ireland. Very bumpy flight in, slightly bumpy one on the way out. But we did get in and out. All the sport we wanted to see was cancelled. The Glentoran game we planned to go to, and I was their fantastic crowd. The Oval was off. Our backup plan of going to Cliftonville and their brilliantly named stadium, the Solitude, on a 4G was cancelled very last minute because of high winds where the fans had already set off, so seemed kind of pointless to cancel, but there we go. And so the sporting aspect of the weekend that I spent in Northern Ireland was wasted, but the cultural aspect of it was not, and it was my first time in Northern Ireland and I enjoyed it tremendously. Just want to say thank you to my group of mates who came with me, including the brilliant David Walker, who you might remember or might know from the Football Cliches podcast, but might remember from an episode in our archive on Vicarage Road, Watford's ground. Do check out that one after you've listened to this fantastic episode with Carly. It's strange, isn't it? Because I'm 40. I've grown up in a time where you just wouldn't go to Belfast for the weekend. Obviously, that's changed, but you still have the memory of that and the hangover of that, and spending time in the city, and particularly walking around it on Sunday morning. You could see how important identity still is to the city. I walked around the Falls Road, the Shankill Road, in West Belfast. And what was striking to me is how close they are to each other, and still the sort of security infrastructure, which is actually more similar to Stadia. The barriers, the walls, the gates to control the flow of people from one area to the next. It's a little jarring to see that in a European city. I'm gonna be honest, but we obviously know the legacy and the reasons why that does exist there. The identity is so important to Belfast. A friend of mine who I met from there tried to explain it to me as Belfast being as more of a series of villages than one sort of cohesive city, and that does make sense with the sort of proliferation of different football teams there representing different areas and different communities, just a city that's just so into its sport. Lots of sports bars, whether it was and clubs, whether it's Northern Irish football, whether they're looking at English football, Scottish football, League of Ireland football, then Gaelic games and rugby, and yeah, it's a city that's pretty sport mad. So it was great to be in, and yeah, I feel like I have a nice appreciation of Belfast now. So that's great. Our episode on Windsor Park is brilliant, but it is a little bit different because, as Carly will be the first person to tell you, she's not a huge sports fan, but she is a brilliant singer, and she's had some fantastic moments at sports grounds around anthems, and so her perspective on being an anthem singer and a performer at sports grounds, I thought was really interesting and was certainly worth exploring. So looking forward to that. As always, we do a little segment called Around the Grounds before we get into the main interview. And this week I want to touch on 3 stories. One is in the Royal Albert Hall in London. The Sumo is coming back to London. They're going to have a bash show at the Royal Albert Hall next year, the first time that it's been there for over 30 years. And it's only the second ever time that they're going to have this bash show outside of Japan, which is great for sumo fans. So anyone who watched a load of sumo on Transworld Sport like I did, sumo, kabaddi, AFL was the sort of Transworld Sport staples, weren't they? So that's a great opportunity to watch some live top quality sumo in the UK next year, and I think it'll be a very popular ticket. The second story I want to touch on is Forest Green Rovers and their brand new wooden stadium. It's been given planning permission. This is going to be really interesting to go to a stadium just built out of different materials than concrete and metal. Obviously, Forest Green Rovers have a sustainability sort of ethos. They're owned by Dale Vince, who's involved in renewable electricity and renewable power. And yeah, they've just putting those principles into action. Some really great architects, the same firm that was behind the swimming pool at the London Olympics with that great wing design. So I have no reason to doubt that this will be a fantastically designed stadium, and obviously when it opens, it's definitely going to be one on my list to go and check out and experience football in a different setting. So one to look forward to there. And finally, I want to talk about Kevin Simfer. It's not really about grounds, although I can crowbar it in. And his latest fundraising effort, I just think what a fantastic friend he is still to Rob Burrow. Great teammate and a great man. And he ran all around the country. He's raised over £1 million. If you haven't seen it, and you can afford to, do chip a few quid into that. And he went to so many great iconic grounds on his different runs. He was at Welford Road, where he was formerly a coach. He was down in the southwest at Gloucester and Bristol Rovers and Bristol City. He had a day in Northern Ireland and visited Windsor Park, which we're going to talk to as well. A day up in Scotland, which was at Celtic Park and Hampden and Firhill Park and the West of Scotland Cricket Ground, the home of the first football international. So yeah, just these runs around these grounds, and obviously why he chooses grounds is because they're centres of community, and sport brings people together, and the importance of community and sport. And so yeah, brilliant effort. And he finished at Old Trafford, home of the Super League Grand Final, where him and Rob obviously have so many fantastic memories. But yeah, what a guy. That's enough from me, and let's get to Carly Powley and let's hear more about Windsor Park. So today on the Ground Jewels, we're joined by Carly Powley, a singer and a singer of some note, who became a bit of a viral sensation a couple of years ago, for her performance of not one national anthem at Windsor Park, Belfast, but 2 national anthems. Carly, welcome to the Ground Jewels.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
No problem. So let's start with that sort of, as I said, big sort of viral moment. How does it come about? Because we're very used to national anthems before international sporting events. We're used to seeing one person deliver one anthem, one person deliver the other anthem. And obviously your presentation of it was completely different and wowed a lot of people. How does that process even start? Because I imagine normally a governing body will just look to book 2 different singers and the opportunity wouldn't even arise.
So, I mean, with a name like Paoli, you can probably guess that I'm part Italian from my mother's side. And I've spent a lot of my life in Italy. I grew up in Mansfield in Nottinghamshire, but then all my summers I spent in Puglia and still do, actually. I've got lots of family there. It's had a big influence on my music career. I mean, my career really started to gain momentum. In 2016, I had a modern Ave Maria that became the anthem, speaking of anthems, for Pope Francis's Jubilee. So that took me on, the most incredible journey that took me to the Vatican and to the Roman Forum, but kind of very much placed me for quite a while in Italy and in Rome and Milan. So living in the UK, you work in lots of different places. And along the years, two very dear friends of mine that happen to live in Liverpool, one is an ex-footballer for Notts Forest, which of course, coming from Mansfield, you can imagine Nottingham Forest is a team that I've always supported and followed. And this gentleman, David Campbell, he came from Derry, but he played for Northern Ireland when Northern Ireland actually qualified for the World Cup. So David Campbell went over to Brazil, and he was actually marking Socrates at the time. So, it was a real sort of David, excuse the pun, and Goliath moment, because he was one of the youngest as well to be playing in the World Cup at that time. So, of course, they've been dear friends for a long time, and also have remained very much in contact with the FA in Northern Ireland, and Italy were coming to play. So as a soprano, very often you're asked to perform the national anthem, and I performed for Her Late Majesty's Jubilee celebrations, also when His Majesty, was first crowned. And it's just one of those things that you learn to do. And the Irish FA asked if I would perform both anthems, because Italy were coming to play this big match at Windsor Park in Belfast. So it meant that I would be opening with the Italian national anthem and then closing with God Save the Queen at that time. But of course, there's always a little bit of, in the past, they've had a few kind of problems with the national anthem, that not everybody feels it's the right song. So they wanted to find a unifying symbol that, would make all of the fans at that time feel like this was something for them and something that they could feel part and proud of. And they had this amazing idea that I could represent Italy, which I wore this beautiful blue Azzurro cloak, the famous Azzurro blue. And as I went into God Save the Queen, there was a big reveal. The cloak came off and I was fully kitted in the Northern Ireland kit, and I was number 10, and the crowd just erupted. I think it's the closest I've ever felt to feeling like a rock star. It was insane, the noise they made. And that was a moment that, thrilled people for quite a while. And from there, it's funny, Italy asked me to do the same trick in San Siro, but the original one was in Windsor Park for Northern Ireland.
Yeah, we'll come to the San Siro one in a bit, but so I mean that's fascinating in terms of your sort of background there and how this sort of came about. Were you expecting the reaction that you got? Because it's often and I appreciate the point that you make there is really valid about the special importance of the anthem in Northern Ireland and the sort of disputed political status there. So, but often the anthem at some sporting events is it's the preamble, isn't it? It's part of the whole thing, but then they're not there for that. So, was there anything in your mind you think, oh, this could be a dud? People could find this a little bit, but it wasn't. It was very much loved. But were you expecting that sort of wow, woof sort of moment that you got from the crowd?
No, I wasn't. And I think it's one of the lovely things when I watch the video back. You can see it, like it's the sheer surprise on my face when I just hear it. It's just like the most enormous roar coming from the stands. And it was thrilling. I mean, it's the start of a football match, but it was pure theatre at its best. And I think one of the great things from that is Northern Ireland then went on to play a cracking match. They drew 0-0 with Italy, which, at the time, Italy were the gods of football. They was right up there, and they weren't expecting to do that well, but they went out there fighting, and we're all on the edge of our seats from start to finish. But I kind of think when often the anthems can become a sort of protocol, but it should be a proud moment, a patriotic moment for the fans to be able to take part in. And I think it does set the rest of the game up, that you're really there supporting your country from start to finish.
Yeah, and I think the clever thing with what you did there was you switched the attention almost from the song, which is controversial, to the kit, which is unifying, and so so for everyone there, whether they're a nationalist or a loyalist persuasion, was that then becomes a moment for them to get to sort of get behind the team, and it's really really interesting. The game is interesting itself because as you say, at the time, Italy were European champions, famously beating England at Wembley in the delayed Euro 2020. This game essentially means they don't qualify for the 2022 World Cup in Qatar. And you're half Italian. Are you there watching? Are you scurried away at the end, or do you get to watch? And if you are watching, are you watching with sort of mixed emotions? Are you really willing Italy on, or are you being polite to your hosts?
Of course, I'm willing Italy on, but at the same time, you all love the underdog to do well. And it was just on that occasion, it was like Italy didn't show up, and Northern Ireland gave everything that they'd got, and it was wonderful to just watch a really fantastic game of football. And it was brilliant football. One of the funny things for me was my sound engineer is Italian, but then my MD, who was with me and was stood next to him, is from Northern Ireland. So you're kind of watching Friends thinking, oh, this is getting tough now. But the whole day was quite an experience. I mean, Ireland's a special place in itself, most of all because of the people. And I remember they put me in the players' lounge to get ready, but it was right next door to where Italy were changing and getting ready. And the whole room, it just smelt of deep heat from corridors into the side. I think they must have bathed in the stuff because that's all you could sort of smell. I got a lovely snap of Mancini going from, the dressing room. He gave a little wave and a thumbs up after the anthems and everything. So it was a fantastic day and a memory I like to look back on.
So when, if people are in a choir or you're getting ready for a big performance, is the smell of deep heat not pervading in theatre land then? Is that not the...
It's very unusual. In my dressing room, I always have my coffee. So that's the Italian in me. There's always my little espresso pot, honey, cough sweets, that kind of thing. But yeah, deep heat's an unusual one for me. And there was a lot of it.
So you talked about growing up in Mansfield. One of my questions was going to be, were you Stags or Forest? And I think you've kind of answered that. And so, but was sport a particularly important part of your early life? And is it an important part of your life now? Because obviously you're very immersed in music and performance. But does sport play any role in your life really, either then or now?
I love to keep fit and I love running. I live in the gym. I like to dance, but I will own up and say I was hopeless at sports. If somebody said, ready, steady, go to me, I used to turn green. I think it was, I don't like to be put in a rush, James. So it was kind of, I didn't have that competitive streak in me, which was completely like polar opposites to my mum, who was on the swimming team, the netball team, super sporty as a child. So it used to drive her insane. But yeah, my competitive side really came out in my singing. But I think ever since the three tenors performed at the opening of the World Cup, that was a moment that married classical music and big sporting events together. And then, of course, you went on to, see the likes of Montserrat Caballé and Freddie Mercury and, with Barcelona. And it's just a way to dramatize, the excitement and the thrill of what's going to be taking place. These days, I find I sing at lots of sporting events. So as we've mentioned, Windsor Park was the initial that took me to San Siro and eventually to the Ryder Cup. So it's meant that I've had lots of wonderful experiences, and I've got friends that, work in sports as well because of it.
That connection between classical music and sport is interesting, and you are right in terms of that sort of, I guess, almost Pavarotti moment. And there's lots of people at the BBC who take credit for sort of marrying that. Another one I would suggest would be, and I hope I don't butcher but Dame Kiri Te Kanawa, World in Union, and the association with the Rugby World Cup, I think, is another. It's a big moment. And then you've got the Champions League theme, and I do forget who wrote that, but I know it's an English guy. But yeah, so this has been this all that time, sort of early 90s. There was this big push to associate classical music and sport, to elevate sport and to give it the gravitas of high culture, whereas traditionally maybe sports seen as relatively low culture, I guess. You talked,
and it also all of a sudden made these tenors and sopranos very cool, which it's a moment, it's a diva-esque moment that you're able to go out and represent your nation, which is a really lovely thing to be able to do and something I'm proud to do.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah, that's a very nice perspective. So you talked a little bit about the San Siro, and the San Siro for football fans, but particularly fans of football architecture and grounds, is one of the great iconic grounds. Obviously, Milan, an incredibly fashionable city, and the stadium itself is very iconic and much bigger than Windsor Park. I think almost 4 times the size in terms of capacity. So, what was your experience like there? And obviously, you're doing it slightly different this time. With the Italian kit is the reveal. But is there anything different that you have to do from sort of technicality, or maybe it's in performance when you're in a larger stadium compared to a smaller one like Windsor Park?
You could really notice the size difference. It was an enormous arena to be, stood in the center of. You did feel very small, but one of the things that you kind of have to take care of the most is sound, because you're in a vast space like that, and essentially you're leading the fans. So one of the worries for me is that I can hear, and you would very often do the sound check and you've got the track in your ear and it's perfectly clear and audible. Once the fans start to sing, you can absolutely lose that, and things sort of become a little bit uncertain. And that's when you're really having to keep your wits about you, because you could be leading, 70,000 spectators late or too fast with the anthem, and it would be caught on television. So there's quite a lot of pressure there, not just for me, but for the sound engineer, to make sure all of that goes to plan, because although you can do a sound check, it's completely different when you've got those thousands of bodies in there, all singing at the tops of the voices. On that particular occasion, it was significant because it was the first time that God Save the King was to be performed at an international football match. So it was a very moving moment. Italy wanted the reveal. It's the President Gravina, who's, the president of the Italian FA. And I actually had a meeting with him in Rome where he'd asked if I'd do this special reveal. He gave me a lovely shirt with Paoli on the back and the blue azzurro and everything. So I kind of knew what was coming. So again, it was a beautiful red cape to represent England and the reveal ready to sing the Italian anthem. But it was a poignant moment because they put the most stunning image of Her Late Majesty up on the mega screens. And you could see that people were emotional. It was so beautiful and very touching how Italy wanted to honour Her Late Majesty as much as we all did. So that was quite special.
Yeah, it was obviously a very, very strange time. Lots going on from a ceremonial point of view, from a political point of view in the UK at that time. You're obviously a professional, but I would be, I'm not, but I would be terrified of sort of 30 plus years of muscle memory just kicking in and singing God Save the Queen. I mean, that would have been going through my head all day before doing it.
Absolutely. You've no idea. I was dreading being, the one soprano that sung the wrong name. And you do. And I think one or two of the players might have started to say the wrong thing. But one of the things that got me nervous on the day, and this is going to sound funny, I had to go on an emergency shopping spree in Milan, which, is no hardship. But it is when you're about to sing at San Siro. So Northern Ireland were a little bit more blasé about what shoes I could wear. And as a singer, you're still a lady going out there to deliver your job. It's nice to be in a heel. You feel right. You feel like you're doing a performance and like you would do on stage. So I had a little black heeled ankle boots when I sung at Windsor Park. And I took the same boots with me for San Siro, got ready to do the sound check, and they said, "Oh, you can't wear those. You can't wear those. That's not regulation." So I thought, oh, okay, what can I wear? It's okay, we'll sort you out. They turned up with these lime green, I think they were either Umbro or Puma trainers. But you can imagine the look. I would have been in this beautiful red cape, blue socks underneath, and lime green trainers. It wasn't the look that I was wanting to go for.
So by regulation, they meant you needed to have like the official footwear provider of whoever it was.
I don't think it was so much the footwear provider. It was just something that wasn't going to put holes in the pitch.
The players wear studs.
I did sort of think about that, but rules are rules. So I ended up shopping and I managed to find some nice ankle boots that had a nice thick sort of heel at the back. And I was sending pictures, on WhatsApp between the organisers at the time and say, will these be okay? And I got the thumbs up. So fortunately, I didn't have to go out as tutti frutti.
I mean, I think that's incredibly accommodating. I think it would have been I would have been quite tempted to tell someone from the Italian FA that they needed to go on the shopping trip rather than you if they wanted you to wear something different.
Well, I did keep the lime green trainers, and you often see me in the gym with them now. They're very good.
Fair enough. At least something good came out of that. In terms of anthems, a little bit more generally. I mean, what am I trying to say here? People love the Italian anthem. I mean, I'm not sure people know the meaning and the word, what story it's necessarily trying to. But by common consensus, the Italian national anthem is viewed as one of the great sort of national anthems. And I'm not sure that, I mean, God Save the King, God Save the Queen is a little bit more divisive in terms of whether it's rousing, and there's often debates over whether the English national anthem should be something different, blah, 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 blah. What's your, what are your thoughts on sort of anthems generally? Which ones are really fun to sing, and which ones are, let's stay positive. Which ones are really fun to sing?
Well, you've kind of said it in a nutshell. The Italian national anthem is a cracking anthem. It sort of sounds like a bit that Verdi didn't put into one of his operas. It's great, and it's a big rousing tune. Brothers of Italy, it's sort of saying, Brothers of Italy. And it's great because you've got kind of the lovely legato opening, but then you've got the Rumpty-Tumpty tune at the end that everybody can sway along to and really get stuck into. I think our national anthem, it's over and done with a little bit too quickly. So it's a glorious melody, and you're always proud to sing it. And it's wonderful every time somebody sings the national anthem, because it's, when you hear lots of voices like that together, it's always a thrill. But it could do with being longer. And there are some amazing arrangements. But I think the other problem is, and I was always already pushing the boundaries when I sung, because the key that it's normally in for football matches is a little bit too low for me to sing. So we already pushed the key up a little bit, so it was a bit higher. But of course, the fans have got to be able to sing along, so you can't make it too high. So yeah, there are some great arrangements of our national anthem, but sadly they're not used at football matches. So yeah, it does mean that Italy get the better tune.
That's fair. And maybe not from sort of a performance standpoint, but moving it beyond sort of the UK and Italy, do you have any particular sort of favourites in terms of anthems? I know France gets mentioned a fair bit. The Welsh will obviously want.
The French national anthem's beautiful. Flower of Scotland's gorgeous.
Oh.
There's so many beautiful songs, that go with countries. I've had to sing the American national anthem at one point at the embassy in London. Yeah, they're great. They're great tunes, and they're wonderful for classical singers to get stuck into. They're nice performance pieces, and it means you get to go out there and stand your ground and deliver something, with great certainty and purpose. And it's an exciting thing to be asked to do.
That's wonderful. And saying American, it's the perfect time to sort of segue into the Ryder Cup here, because you sang the Italian national anthem at the opening ceremony of the Ryder Cup. That's always struck me as incredibly rowdy. That whole for a really polite game of like golf is typically seen as, and the fact that there's no actual sport happening, it seems quite lively. What was your experience of being at Marco Simone Golf Club?
It was a funny I spoke to Italian friends and I'd say, "Oh, I'm coming over soon to open the Ryder Cup," and they'd go, "Okay, what?" So basically, for Italy, anything that's not football, they're just not aware of it. And I don't think Rome quite knew what had hit them, because the Ryder Cup basically took over Rome. It was incredible. They had parades down the street, down the big famous shopping street. There were banners everywhere. And it was something that they weren't expecting. So Marco Simone, the golf club where it took place, it's slightly out of Rome. Beautiful venue. It was something like 35, 36 degrees, so it was seriously hot. And you kind of enter, it's like a village in itself when you actually arrive, with the stalls that are set up, the shopping area. So it was something I wasn't quite expecting, but performing on that occasion, I sung just the Italian national anthem. And I had the European players lined up in front of me, and it was wonderful. I wasn't aware how many people were watching, and I think the stage manager could have spared me of this. I was ready to go out, lovely pink dress, well warmed up, and I felt set up. And then all of a sudden he says, "It's going great, isn't it?" He says, we've just had word there's 153 million people tuned in watching this live now. And that was like the last thing I needed to hear. Just, he could have saved it for 2 minutes and I would have sung the anthem and it would have been over, and then he could have told me that. But yeah, that was, I'm glad the skirt was long enough to not show that my knees were knocking, because they were on that occasion.
That's a bit of pressure, isn't it? It's basically just saying, just before you're walking out, by the way, don't mess this up.
Yeah, but it's your job, and you just go out there and and I was pleased with my performance. And one of the brilliant things where they had the like the equivalent of Italy's Red Arrows do a flyover.
Oh yeah,
and the timing was perfect. So as I did the big high note at the end and the arm went up in the air, the planes flew over with the Italian flag colours, and it was wonderful. It was really dramatic.
It was. I remember watching that actually, and I'm sort of jealous of countries with tricolours, because they can do that. I mean, you may remember, the Red Arrows are. I live in Nottinghamshire as well. I live in Southwell. So the Red Arrows train a lot around here, and you might have seen them when you're growing up. But yeah, France and Italy, you can just send 9 jets over, and nice little representation of their flag. It's pretty cool. It is a pretty nice way to add a little bit more pomp and ceremony to sort of everything.
Well,
there.
We always laugh that Italians are famous for being late. And on this occasion, they were bang on time, so I can't call them for that anymore.
Oh, thanks to you as well, because that's the other thing. I mean, I suppose probably not so much with the Ryder Cup, but people bet on like the length of the Star Spangled Banner at the Super Bowl. It's quite, there's it's amazing how much, I guess it's all interpretation and performance and how an artist approaches a tune, but the variation in length and of song can be quite dramatic, can't it?
Well, I think the Star Spangled Banner, it's actually quite a dangerous anthem to perform, because very often it's performed a cappella, which means, if you don't have the right note in your head when you go out, and it's easy to, when you're in the stands, you've got the note, you're set to go, but then you've got a whole walk to do before you get to your place and you start. The beginning is quite low, but then if you start in the wrong place, it can get deceivingly high. And you've heard many an artist almost start to strangle themselves because they've started slightly too high in the opening and they've got nowhere to go afterwards. So yeah, that one's quite a risky one to perform, especially if you're going to do it a cappella, as it's often done.
Yeah, there are some bloopers, fails, I don't know what you want to call them, but because that anthem gets performed so often at sporting events, I don't know if you're, but in America there'll be a version of the Star Spangled Banner before every baseball game, before every basketball game. If they're playing the Toronto team, there's a version of "O Canada" as well. It's anthem. And then occasionally, if you've got to find 81 different singers for a baseball club each, some of them, are going to have different interpretations, not be as strong. And then there are some times where you do get a viral moment for the sort of wrong reasons. But that's made me sort of think, and it sort of ties back to one of the things you said at the start in terms of making sure that the purpose of the anthem is to highlight the specialness of the occasion. The Ryder Cup, obviously special, 2 countries playing each other. when you get him as frequently as you do in America, I wonder whether it sort of takes away from that specialness. I remember running a 10K in LA once. It was 6 o'clock in the morning of Sunday, and I was getting ready to go. I had my headphones in, and then everyone's like, you see everyone sort of stand up a little bit, and we're having the Star Spangled Banner at 6 a.m. for essentially a fun run, on a, which felt slightly excessive, but that's my British perspective on it.
Yeah, and I think the other thing about that, it's not a moment for an artist to show off. It's in a glorified way, you're a choir leader. It should be a moment that a singer can lead, the fans in their national song. They should be able to sing along to it. So I think when you start to add all different sort of riffs and decorations, it can sort of become a slightly alienating moment as to, look what I can do, and slightly less unifying as a patriotic part of the ceremony.
Yeah, one of my favorite versions of the anthem, and I don't know if you've ever seen this, but I think it's Paul Young doing God Save the Queen before Euro 96. He sings the first note, the crowd are so loud, and he just steps back and doesn't sing, and he just lets the entire crowd do it. And it's just that as the lead, I guess he sort of sensed that his presence wasn't needed there for the moment, and that's quite a brave thing to do when you've been booked to do something, to say, oh, I'm not, the crowd have got this.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Of course it is. But it is essentially, it's their moment. And I think you've always got to remember that was the wonderful thing about what Northern Ireland did. They made it inclusive to everyone, because it is the spectators' moment. It's their moment to cheer on the country and set up the game that's about to take place. And that's what it should always be about. It's honor for everybody, not just the singer that stood up there. And it's there's nothing more wonderful than hearing everybody's voices, in unity like that. It's empowering.
Oh, what a wonderful sentiment to sort of end on there. I think that's brilliant. I think that's the exact right sort of approach to it. But I'm going to have to put an edit point in there. Sorry. It's okay. Carly, thank you very much for joining us on the Ground Jewels. If people do want to see you showing off and putting a few more of your own sort of personal touches in a time where maybe you're not leading a choir, but you're, front and center of the performance, how can they see you?
Well, I don't just perform anthems, funnily enough, James. So at the minute it's Christmas all the way for me. I'm just about to release my new Christmas album, it's a collection of all the traditional favorites. I've got some amazing children's choirs on there with me who actually, it's a Directions Theatre Arts, it's where I trained as a kid. And when I left the Royal Northern, the music college, I went back there to teach. So it's an album that brings me home. And in celebration of it, I'll also be performing at a concert in Nottingham's very own Albert Hall. So that's on the 21st of December. And again, I've got 60 kids joining me on stage. So I don't know whether I'm mad or just really brave. Some wonderful artists, like there's an Italian singer called Mikey Introna, who's a fantastic showman. Beautiful gospel singer called Rachel John, who also joins me for a duet on the album. So it should be quite a celebration, and it's the first time I've done my own concert back at home. So it's something I'm really looking forward to.
Oh, I'm sure it will be a fantastic evening. I'm very sorry I can't attend. My daughter would love it, I know, but we're away for Christmas. It's just slightly too close to Christmas for us, but I'm sure it'll be a lovely evening, and I'm sure people will check out that Christmas album too.
Yeah, the more the merrier.
I really enjoyed that. I hope you did too. Thank you very much to Carly for her time and sharing her expertise and her passion and those brilliant stories about the San Siro, the Ryder Cup, and of course Windsor Park, Belfast, where she had that fantastic viral moment. And I know she's been amazingly supported by the Green and White Army ever since. Super passionate fans in Northern Ireland, as you can imagine. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this episode of The Ground Jewels. If you did, obviously tell someone about it. And if you didn't, don't tell anyone. That's rude. But if you did, and this is your first time with us, or you've recently joined us, as I know a number of people have, we have a really extensive archive that you might want to explore with some great guests. So if you've enjoyed this one from Carly Powley about Windsor Park, Belfast, how about going and listening to Megan Scully talk about the RDS grounds in Dublin? It was a really great chat. One of our best equestrian episodes. It helps it's our only equestrian episode, but also if you want to just focus on football grounds, you can go to last week's episode with the cartoonist David Squires and talk about the county ground Swindon. You could go back in the archive a bit further to Portman Road, where we talked to Dr. Adam Rutherford, the geneticist. You could go back even further in our archive and we could talk to Ailey Doyle, the athlete, about Tynecastle, home of Heart of Midlothian. There's so many great little stories in our archive. I would encourage you to check it out. Please tell other people about the podcast. We're growing. It's really positive. More people are finding out about us. But it would always nice to be bigger, and the bigger we get, the better guests that we can get. I've got some really exciting asks out at the moment, including for at least one person who is a bona fide national treasure. So the more people we can get on board talking about the podcast, the better quality of podcasts that you can receive. So, you know, it's good for me, but it's also good for you. But anyway, until next time.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.